I have a great pleasure to talk with Rika, who is also from Tokyo. Rika, hi. Very nice to have you in our community personal branding program for female entrepreneurs. So, can you share with us, Rika, what is your story?
My story. Well, as you mentioned, I'm not only in Tokyo now, but I grew up here. I have a German mother and a Japanese father, so I went to the International School of the Sacred Heart. And I went to the US for college. And after college, I came back to Japan actually to work for a couple of years. And then I moved back to the US and I moved to London. I've kind of worked globally, and my role as I've been working through my career has always been a global role. And my background and where I've focused most of my career thus far has been mostly in marketing, strategy, business development, and partnerships. And also from the very beginning, my first job out of school, I went to Princeton University and UCLA. And the first job that I had was actually at Sony Online in the first .com boom. So I've been steeped in disruptive tech from the very beginning of my career. At Sony Online, I was one of, I think there were probably less than 15 people in the organization back then. And from the internet 1.0 era, I then moved into mobile. So when I moved back to Japan, Docomo had just launched iMode, and I became obsessed with mobile commerce. And so I used that background, that experience, to move back to the States and over to London. And I joined Accenture in the marketing and sort of strategy development group, first in wireless, because that was where I was focusing my efforts and my energy. And then I moved into, again, sort of the disruptive tech, like digital rights management, digital content management. And then I worked on strategic projects for Frank Modrison, who eventually became Accenture CIO. So anyway, so through my career, I've worked in both large enterprises like Accenture, NVIDIA, American Express, and I've also worked for a handful of startups. When I moved back to Japan, actually, that was my first startup. So China.com. Crazy time. We IPO'd on NASDAQ, stock doubled twice over a few months. It was insane time. So unfortunately, when the .com bomb happened, my shares were underwater. I never was able to benefit from that. But since then, I've been in disruptive tech startups like in augmented reality and in Fintech. So I've worked for a startup that was working in virtual currency. So I've had really great fortune of coming across extraordinary opportunities and people that have really pushed the limits of where technology was going to reinvent, redefine, and completely disrupt a specific area of business and commerce. So even though part of me wishes that I had the role model of a product manager or an engineer, because that might have been the path I would have pursued, I still feel very grateful for having had the chance to work in technology and work with amazing engineers from the very beginning.
Can you explain more where that passion for technology coming from, and how is being a woman in the male-dominated industry? And so if you can give us a little bit more insights about that.
Yeah. When I was at Sacred Heart, I did something called the International Baccalaureate. And with the IB, I did 4 higher and 2 subsidiary courses. And the 4 higher were English Literature, Fine Arts, and then organic chemistry and higher math. So it was very much a split between the two. And I always loved science and technology. And when I went to Princeton, I didn't really know which direction I wanted to go in. So it was really by virtue of having ended up at Sony Online, which happened because I actually met a Japanese woman in New York, which is a whole nother story. But so ending up at Sony Online was a fluke in many respects. It wasn't designed for me to go join the startup startup within Sony. But since then, I have sort of really relished the opportunity to work in a field where people are pushing the boundaries, and there is just tremendous fast movement and disruption happening. And as the only woman, I grew up a tomboy. I had a lot of sort of male friends growing up, but I never really paid attention to being the only woman in the room. I was just one of the guys, essentially. especially at NVIDIA. Well, back then, NVIDIA's changed a lot. This is back in 2006 when I worked for NVIDIA. And the first time that I really sort of woke up to it was when I went to Princeton's first Women Alumni Conference in 2008 called She Roars. And at first I wasn't going to go, but then I thought, well, I should check it out. And when I arrived there, I attended a session about women in leadership. And it was the first time that I was confronted with the data of women in leadership roles. And then soon afterwards, because I've been in Silicon Valley since 2006, it's kind of like, if you kind of go through life and you see this color and you don't have a name for the color. And then one day someone's like, hey, Ed, that's red. Well, afterwards, now you have a name for that color, you're going to see red everywhere you are. And it was kind of like that, where now when I kind of went back into my world of being the only woman, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. It's painfully true. So, and I think a lot of the sort of my passion for tech has never been impacted necessarily. And I think the whole Me Too movement that happened also cast a really interesting light in the whole space, because I've definitely encountered my own challenging moments as it relates to what was the undercurrent for Me Too. But so therein also is a responsibility, right? Once you have awareness, once you have an understanding, you have a responsibility to make change. So I started to get really involved. And so when I worked for American Express, I worked for Dan Schulman, who's now the PayPal CEO. I actually launched the Women's Interest Network for American Express for the West Coast. And the Women's Interest Network was, and again, by the way, at PayPal, American Express, I was working on the digital wallet initiative with Surf for American Express. So again, it was disruptive tech. And American Express hired me because I had the background working with the startup in Fintech. So anyway, so I launched the Women's Interest Network. And it just was really extraordinary to see the response to that initiative. Women's Interest Network was an internal employee support program for women leaders and rising stars. And so I would say that once I was awoken to the challenge, I tried to engage in whatever way I could. And then I'm sure we'll get to this, but this has become even more enhanced and accentuated with the work that I'm doing today, which is, BoardSeatMeet, but I'm sure we'll talk about that.
And Rika, I'm curious, what is your current project? So what is the project you are working now, and what is your vision for 2020?
So my current initiative is called BoardSeatMeet. And you can find it at boardseatmeet.com. It's board seat, like a board seat for a corporate board, and meet as an MEET. And it was inspired by Princeton's second Women Alumni Conference last year, where I attended a session about women on corporate boards. And at that point, I'd already been the VP at American Express. And at that point, I'd been going through my career. I wouldn't call it corporate climbing necessarily. And I was really surprised that it wasn't until I was sitting in the audience that I thought about corporate governance. Like, it never dawned on me to think about corporate governance as something that would be a role in even a full-time vocation for many women, retired CEOs and former leaders today. Mm-hmm. That combined with all three women that were on the panel, as they talked about the challenges that they had in getting a board seat, and they were all public company board members. One thing that I noticed that they said consistently was it wasn't just a network or knowing people. It was a warm network, what we call social capital. It's what you develop when you go golfing with people, when you go play poker, when you go drinking. You're starting to see that these are all areas that where men in business have always, that's kind of been their area. So I started thinking about that and thinking there must be a way we can solve this. I mean, look, there's extraordinary organizations like Women 2020, Boardless, How Women Lead, really focused on this space, especially because soon after the Princeton conference, California passed the Senate Bill 826, which essentially requires California publicly traded companies to have at least one woman on the board by the end of by July 2019, and by the end of 2021, if it was 6 or more people on the board, 3 of them had to be women. So there's all this, like, a lot of momentum in this space, but I thought about how I would be able to solve it. And Harvard Business Review had an article a couple of years ago called the Network Orchestration Model, Business Model, which is essentially what Upwork and Airbnb and Uber do, is that they create this space where someone looking for something and someone looking for what that person is, or providing what that person is looking for, is something that we could potentially use to help women, to start with women anyway, because it's about diversity and governance, period. But let's focus on women. Let's help them shortcut how they can actually build social capital by making it much easier for board members to find them and for the women to find the board members to get that connection. It's kind of akin to, how many times have you sat next to somebody on an airplane or a bus, and if you happen to strike a conversation, an hour later, that conversation could potentially to that person become someone meaningful to you. That's the social capital piece of it. So what we're doing is we're building a platform where men and women board members, past or present, public company, private company, not-for-profit boards, they can essentially make available on the platform an hour to meet for coffee or to meet like this over Hangouts initially on our platform. And you have, on the other side, you have women candidates who are not just board ready. There's a lot of focus on board ready women. We're also interested in getting women early exposure. So when I was a manager at Accenture a long time ago, had I been exposed to the opportunity to meet with a board member and start to understand what is governance and what is corporate governance, it might have informed my career decisions differently. So the idea is that if you're a woman candidate, you can browse by industry and by region and find board members that have open slots on their calendar and click on it to make a meeting request. And the board members on their side will be able to look kind of like LinkedIn requests. They'll be able to see the meeting requests for their available slots for coffee or for Hangouts. It's totally up to the board member, and essentially accept based on the woman candidate profile. And eventually, over time, we'll make it so that the platform enables some matching, because board members are often looking for a specific skill or expertise because they're trying to change the board profile. They need to fill a gap. And then on the other side, you have women that have specific capabilities or expertise. So that's the longer term goal. And we intend to also partner with organizations like Women Corporate Directors, How Women Lead, to provide some of that content and skilling up, because being on a board is definitely, something that you need some know-how and training and have some background. So that's the platform that we're building. We're in a closed beta right now with the U.S.-Japan Council. We'll be opening up the beta to we have a wait list of board members and candidates that want to be part of the platform. So we'll open up the beta in about 2 weeks or so. And if anybody who's listening to this wants to sign up, you can go to BoardSeatMeet.com and join the waitlist. And so we're in 2020, we're essentially going to be building that community of both women candidates and board members. And while, our headquarters is in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, but really the platform we intend to have open to anybody that wants to have access to it. Because again, you can meet over Google Hangouts. So just because you're not in Tokyo doesn't mean that you can't meet with a board member in Tokyo or vice versa. So especially for Japan, the challenge is so much bigger here in Japan as it relates to enabling women to gain these really critical leadership positions that help shapeshift fundamentally, not just because it's the right thing to do or the legal thing to do, because in some states in the US there are quotas, but there's more and more just undeniable evidence that diverse governance yields much better results than non-diverse. So we're starting with women. Eventually, over time, BoardSeatMeet is going to be there to help bring diversity in general. And Japanese corporate boardrooms, or governance in general, definitely needs more diversity. And so I'm excited about the opportunity here, not just for Japanese women, but also for the international community of women that are here in Japan, because there's a tremendous opportunity for them for those different board roles. And technology is one way to help solve that problem, and BoardSeatMeet is what I hope to be one of those critical platforms that makes that happen.
Rika, thank you so much. And our platform is contained of 700 female entrepreneurs across the globe. 60-70% are based in Asia, and I believe many of them are interested in tech, and now they have you. So we are all looking forward to see your platform, to support your platform, and of course to have some access to you and to all other mentors on your platform to build that new capital, which you call social capital, which is so important, like building a relationship with the people who already have experience and looking the people who have a specific skill.
Yeah. And actually, can I just add one thing? It's not just for the women on your platform that would be looking to join boards. I would also encourage your community and the audience for your community here that if you're looking for board members to join your startup board, because that's the other thing is that there aren't enough women on startup boards because it's mostly like the investor community that places people on those boards. So it'll hopefully be a two-sided opportunity. And just one other thing as well is there's a woman that's been working with me. She's been a senior in high school, so she's 17. But she's been so inspired by the board members that she's met, women and men board members. And one other thing that we noticed is that while the community of women who are board members is small, what's even smaller are the women who are board chairs. So what I call chairwomen. And those women don't actually use the title chairwoman. They use chairman, chairperson, or board chair. And so through the inspiration of Katie, we're actually writing a book called Dear Chairwoman that's meant to be sort of a sidecar to BoardSeatMeet. But if any of your audience are on a board today, nonprofit, private company, doesn't matter, or if any of you know women who are on boards, please connect them with me because I'd love to interview them for the book. And what we're doing is we're taking those interviews, kind of like our conversation here today. We're taking those interviews and we're converting them into letters. So let's say, for example, Kathy Matsui is a force of nature here in Tokyo. Hopefully we'll interview her. But what we'll do is we'll interview her and I'll say, Dear Chairwoman. In other words, the book is meant to be a rallying cry for the young women of tomorrow and calling them chairwomen. So in other words, own the title chairwoman. Say, my name is Kathy. This is my journey to the boardroom. This is what it's been like being on the board. Love, Kathy. So we're going to compile all these letters into a book called Dear Chairwoman. And so I really encourage you on BoardSeatMeet.com. There's a section towards the bottom where you can nominate people. You can nominate yourself. And we'd love to get those stories out there because there's nothing more inspiring. As you know, with the work that you're doing, the awesome work that you're doing, Ed, there's nothing more inspiring than storytelling and getting people to tell the world what it is that they're doing and the impact that they're making.
Rika, thank you so much. We will support your mission. We definitely need your initiative. You're coming on the right place at the right time. And if you can participate to build your platform, nobody will be more happier than me. And I think many women already find some useful information. But this is not only one interview. I believe we will have opportunity to cooperate much more. So whenever you have some event, online or offline, be free to let us know. We will follow you. We will follow you, and also we want you to succeed with your platform because that's all about like support women in entrepreneurship, women who are supporting other women, but not only because of the women, because of the whole ecosystem.
Yes.
So which will also makes men more happier in the whole society. Rika, thank you so much for your time in your busy schedule. I know you have to go now, so.
Thank you so much, Ed, for this opportunity. This is really great, and I hope to meet some people in your community in person here in Tokyo when I'm here. So thank you so much.
You have community across the globe, so wherever you go, you can meet someone from our community.
Yay! Okay.